Hi guys. Hi, don't call me Dr. Sean, just call me Sean. It's okay. No one calls me Dr. Sean. I'm currently a resident in Monash, doing medical training. So surgery's a bit lost already. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview about working in Australia and the pathways of specializing in Australia. Very briefly. Outline of my talk. So I'm just going to talk about the Australian hospital structure. And then you can sort of compare it to Malaysian if you've been to a Malaysian hospital. Road after internship, working in a rural versus working in a metropolitan hospital, because I work in both. And just generally the Australian hospital culture, which should then lead you on how to get a good reference and like how to fit in and make yourself known to all the bosses. Australian hospital structure. So this is like the hierarchy of doctors in Australia. When you first graduate and come out of work, you start off as an intern, and then after that you become a resident, which is what I am right now. Some people call residents HMOs, hospital medical officers. After that you become a registrar, and then when you finish your training, you become a fellow and then a consultant. Equivalently in Malaysia, interns are your housemen. Residents / HMOs are sort of like your junior MOs. Registrars are like your senior MOs. Fellows consultants are like specialists. Difference is internship in Australia is only 1 year. So you work for 1 year and then you get full registration and you're done. And then in terms of residents and registrars, there's two kinds of registrars. Usually the registrar is the person, when you go on the ward round, the registrar runs the ward round if the specialist is not there. The registrar is like your mini boss. Some registrars are accredited registrars. That means they are part of like a bigger college training program. Some registrars are unaccredited registrars, which means they're not part of the college training program, but for that ward round purpose, they are the boss. If that makes sense. Differences between fellows and consultants. Fellows already have their fellowship letters, so they're full consultants, but they are sort of like bridging between a registrar and consultant. They're just working there to get more experience before they come out fully as a consultant and work as a specialist. So in terms of whatever qualifications, they already have full specialist qualifications. They're just doing a lot of dirty work, a lot of long hours, low pay, just to get like connections and to get more experience, and they just travel around working in different spots. Put this in because I was really confused about different kinds of nurses when I first started working. There's like so many different kinds, but it took me a while, but I figured it out. In terms of hierarchy, there's also a hierarchy in nursing, which you probably figured out if you've been to a hospital in Malaysia. In Australia, the hierarchy, they're called graduate nurses, and then RN2s, RN1s, associate nurse unit manager, nurse unit manager, and then there's like educators. So graduate nurses are like the housemen of nurses. They just graduated and they don't know much, and they're also still being supervised. Then after that, if they do further studies, they can become a registered nurse too, which then means they can prescribe Panadol, which is a bit stupid, but they can self-initiate Panadol. It's like, you need some Panadol, have some Panadol. Then registered nurses 1, they can prescribe Panadol plus a bit more. Associate nurse unit managers are usually the people that run the ward on a specific day. They're like in charge of the ward. And then nurse unit managers are like in charge of the ward for the whole year round, the whole time. They're sort of like the matrons, if you think of it that way. The nurse unit managers are the matrons, and the associate ones are like the assistant matrons. And then clinical nurse educators are like tutors. If you think of it like bedside tutors, these are the nursing bedside tutors. They go around teaching nurses how to do cannula, how to put a catheter in. They also teach students, medical students sometimes. They're really good, like super good. Alright, this is like my main slide. This is the pathway of specializing in Australia after you graduate. It's a bit small and very blurry, so I will use the mouse. Yeah. So when you graduate, you start off as an intern for 1 year, which is like a housemanship. In internship, there's 3 core rotations that you must complete and pass to pass your internship. You have to do a medical rotation, a surgical rotation, and emergency. Once you finish those 3, then there's 2 more rotations which you can do whatever you want, no one really cares. But once you finish that and you pass that, and your supervisor ticks them off, you can pass the internship. During internship, you're only provisionally registered as a doctor, so you don't have full registration, which means you only can work as an intern in your hospital, but you can't work anywhere else. But once you pass internship, you get full medical registration with the Australian board, so you can work anywhere. You can go to like a clinic somewhere and just do locum shifts if you want, no one cares. You got free roam. Once you finish internship, then you begin your residency. Residency, some people call it HMOs, hospital medical officers. Some people call it RMOs, registered medical officers. It's all the same thing. In residency, usually you just work. It's sort of like you're more experienced intern. You still do the same job, but you have full registration and people give you a more free reign. You can do more stuff. And once you have become a senior resident, like once you've been in residency for a while, you can start picking up unaccredited registrar jobs. So you can run the ward round. You're not in a training program, but on ward rounds, you're the most senior person. You run the ward round. You're the boss. Everyone listens to you. Once you finish your residency and you get into a training program, that's officially when you become a registrar. And when I say this, you become an accredited registrar. You're accredited by the college. Depending on what specialty, there's many different kinds of registrars. So if you want to be like a GP in a GP clinic, you have to do GP regging. Medical specialties, you have to be a medical registrar, surgical registrars, any other specialty, they have their own registrars. Pathology registrar, radiology registrar, ops and gynae registrar, pediatric registrar. It just means you're in the training program. So that's sort of when you're training to be whatever specialty you want. And then when in all interns, residents, and registrars, collectively, we are called junior medical officers. So we're still doctors in training, we are junior. But once you finish your training, you become a senior medical officer, which means you're a specialist, you're a consultant. You have your letters, you can call shots, you can work privately as a boss. In between that, as I mentioned before, some people opt to do a fellowship. Long time ago, you don't really have to do a fellowship. Now, it's almost everyone who finished registrar training does a fellowship. Jobs are getting more competitive in Australia. So if you do a fellowship, usually you leave whatever hospital system you're in, you go to a different hospital system, you go overseas, and you work as a fellow. When hospitals really like hiring fellows because they're fully qualified. They're specialists. They already got their letters, but because they want to work for you to get more experience, you can hire them. You put them in a lower paid job, and you make them work like 24 hours a day, non-stop, on call 7 days a week. So you get someone who's fully qualified, but you work super hard just to get connections and get more experience. So hospitals really like fellows. In terms of pay grade, fellows actually earn less than registrars, which doesn't make sense to me. So they take a pay cut, they have to do extra research, they have to do teaching, and just to get connections and experience. So that's sort of the training pathway in Australia. Internship, residency, registrar. Now everyone does a fellowship for at least 1 or 2 years. Highly competitive programs like cardiology. I know people do fellowships for like 6-7 years. Some people do a PhD in between, and then they become a food specialist. I'm just going to talk about 2 pathways in broad, medical and surgical. I'm not going to talk about like peds or ONG because it's very variable. But most people end up going either the medical or surgical pathway. So medical, if you want to specialize in a medical specialty, you do internship for 1 year. After internship, you can apply for basic physician training. Basic physician training is 3 years. Whatever medical specialty you want to do, you have to go through basic physician training. It's sort of like the starting point. This is sort of like the MRCP in UK, if you think of it that way. In Australia, we call it the RACP, Royal Australasian College of Physicians, and it's a 3-year training program. So you get BPT 1, 2, and 3, and then you sit exams in BPT 3, which is equivalent to the MRCP in the UK. For me, I just finished BPT 1 this year, going into BPT 2. Once you finish BPT, some people don't get into BPT straight after internship. You have to keep trying. You can get into BPT straight after internship, most people do. But if you miss out, you can just sort of fluff around, do another resident year in hospital doing random rotations, and then try again. You have to apply every year. But once you're in, it's a 3-year program. Once you finish BPT and you pass your exams, then you have to apply for an advanced physician training program. In any medical specialty, so you can apply for cardiology, you can apply for respiratory, you can apply for gastroenterology, hematology, oncology, rheumatology, whatever you want. They're all 3-year training programs, but they're very, 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 very competitive. Very competitive. Most people don't get into an APT training program straight after BPT. Most people have to spend 1 or 2 years in between, working a random job and doing research to try to sell themselves and build their CV to get into an APT program. So the bottleneck of training for the medical pathway is here, getting into an APT program. But once you're in APT program, life is really sweet. You just work really hard, you're always on call, and you work like 24/7 non-stop because That's how you're expected to work. But there's no exams. You work for 3 years, and then you get your fellowship letters, and you're a fellow of the college, and you're a specialist. Then you can become a fellow and work as a fellow somewhere. So there's no exams after basic physician training exams. You just work for 3 years once you're in. Unless you pick hematology. Hematology has like a pathology entrance exam, where you have to look at slides and stuff. But that's the only exception. Once you finish APT, you can do your fellowship either in the same hospital. Most people travel to a different country, and then they use that excuse to like travel around and backpack around the world as well. Once you finish your fellowship, then you're a fully qualified specialist. So that's the medical pathway. The fastest you can do, let's say 1 year, 3 years, 3 years, fellowship 1 or 2 years. So the fastest you can do is probably like 9 years, give or take, then you're a full specialist. But that's like the fastest. Most people take a bit more. Surgical pathway is a bit different. So you have to do internship for 1 year. After internship, you enter residency, and then once you do residency for a few years, you can start picking up unaccredited registrar jobs. And how long you're in this residency plus unaccredited registrar job period really depends on how fast you can build your CV to get into a surgical training program. Some people take, the really quick ones I know take 2 years and they get in, but those are like the super high flyers. Most people take about 3, 4, I know a guy who took like 7 years in this bit here before he actually got into a training program. So it really depends how fast you can build up your CV. Most people, to build their CV in this part, they do research, they do a diploma of anatomy, they do other courses, and they get really good references. That's what you do really. It's all about connections in surgery, unfortunately. If you know the director of surgery and he really vouches for you to the college, you get in quicker. But once you get into a training program, it's a 5-year training program usually. Usually it's a 5-year training program in whatever surgery you do. And then there's exams spread out in between, but depending on the specialty of surgery you pick, it's at different times. After you finish your 5-year training program and you pass the exams, you go do a fellowship and then you're a consultant. Training in surgery in Australia is really, really, really competitive. It's very hard to get from here to here because they take very few people. These are the numbers for accepted applicants into surgical training programs in 2016. They're all for Australia and New Zealand combined, unless I just put brackets Australia. So last year, only 5 people got into the cardiothoracic training program in both Australia and New Zealand, 2 countries combined. So very few. General surgery, they take a lot. In Australia alone, in all states in Australia, they take 81. Neurosurgery in both countries, they only take 11, and so on. So it's very competitive. That's probably about it in terms of like pathway after I did general medicine. There's no specialty medicine. So if you're a medical problem, you come under the general medicine team. Compared to Melbourne Hospital, where if you have heart attack, GI bleed, you go under gastroenterology. Hospital, you get to see a bigger variety of patients. So when I did Gen Med, I got to see strokes, I got to see heart attacks, GI bleeds, weird infections, everything. But if you work in a metropolitan hospital, you do Gen Med, all you see is demented patients who have a UTI. Because a stroke will go under neurology, heart attack goes under cardiology. So if you do Gen Med in a big metropolitan hospital, legitimately everyone has delirium, dementia, pneumonia or UTI. That's about it. Because no other specialty will take them. Rural hospitals are not really that hectic compared to metropolitan hospitals. It's a bit slower pace, everyone's just relaxed, friendlier. Because there's not that many departments and not that many doctors, you get more hands-on experience. You get to do more stuff in a rural hospital. You get more you actually physically get to do something. A good example is if someone arrests, you will do the CPR. Whereas if you're doing cardiology in a big hospital, someone arrests, the nurses are already on the patient doing CPR before you get there, and you just stand there and like, how comatose. That's all you can do. In rural hospitals, because it's such a small, tight-knit setting, you get to know your supervisors and your consultants very well, and they generally can provide very good references, but how people rank their references in the job application process, I'm not too sure. I'm not sure if you want to apply to Metropolitan Hospital whether a rural reference would be good. They would prefer, I think, a Metropolitan reference or Metropolitan Hospital, but I'm not too sure. And again, kampong setting, friendlier people, friendlier patients, everything is friendly, everyone's friendly. Big city hospitals, not so friendly. Most are still okay, but they can be snappy sometimes. And the last thing, if you're thinking about money, rural hospitals pay you overtime if you want to claim overtime. No, if you work in a city hospital, no overtime. You work 10 hours overtime, no one pays you, you just work. Metropolitan hospital, less variety of patients, but you tend to see weird and wonderful and complex patients. If you think of it that way. Unless you do gen med, then it's delirium, dementia, UTI, pneumonia. You get a big number of patients in metropolitan hospitals because they come from everywhere. Let's say a gen med team in a metropolitan hospital can have, I don't know, 70 patients, 60, 70 patients. And then your ward round goes up to like 8 p.m. And you keep going. There's opportunity for research. This is a big thing I highlight in metropolitan hospitals. You get research in rural hospitals as well, but the numbers you get in a rural hospital setting to do research are way smaller compared to a big metropolitan hospital. And if you aim to publish something, it's easier to publish something from a big hospital compared to a small hospital. Like the journals you target is easier from a big hospital. So it's better research opportunity, if you ask me, if you go to a city hospital. And then if you develop a good connection with a boss in a city hospital, usually that boss has something to do with the college and they can vouch for you secretly behind doors to the college. Accept this guy into training, he's really good. Whereas in a rural setting, there's good consultants there, but most of them don't hold positions in the college, so they can't secretly vouch for you, if that makes sense. It's all underhand stuff. And metropolitan hospitals, because you see all the weird and rare and wonderful stuff, generally it's better for exam training. Because in exams, no one asks you about UTI, pneumonia, delirium, or dementia. They're going to ask you about something rare, like some rare disease that you never heard of. And generally in a metropolitan hospital, you get to see the rare diseases, and they also teach you about that. So it's better training if you sit exams. That's probably about the biggest difference. I worked in Traralgon for 10 weeks, and as a houseman, I think that's probably the best rotation I had. It was really good. I saw many different patients. I had a really good boss. I live like 1 minute walking distance to hospital because that's hospital accommodation, and that was really good. I just wake up, go to ward rounds, go back to sleep. Wake up, go to ward rounds, go back to sleep. Which means I didn't have life, but it was good. It was a really good experience. But in terms of training, I don't know. I wouldn't go back there for my full-time training because I don't think I get enough specialty experience. So, but I'm going back there again this year as a reg because I really like the place. So it's up to you where you work, like in a country setting or a metropolitan setting. But I like a bit of both, if that makes sense. Australian hospital culture and hospital reference. This, if you remember one thing from my talk, please remember this, especially the fifth years who are coming across. It's just a very different setting compared to Malaysia. I did like two electives in Malaysia throughout my medical school time. One in Klang Hospital and one in UH, which they call PPUM. PPUM? Yeah. I did two rotations, and they're so different. Hospital culture is very different here compared to Australia. In Australia, please take note, everyone is very casual. Very casual. No one calls me Dr. Tan, no one calls me Dr. Sean. Everyone just calls me Sean. Like if you say Dr. Tan, I'm not used to it. I might not even like respond to you. That's how casual it is in Australia. In general, surgical departments are a bit different. I wouldn't call a surgeon by his first name if I don't know him very well. I'll call him Mr. Smith or Miss Smith if it's a lady. I wouldn't call her John or Jane. But if you work for them long enough, then you'll be like, you just call them John and Jane. But then like at the start, I wouldn't call them John straight up. I'll just call him Mr. Smith. But every other department usually you can go, hey Ralph, hey Don, and those are your specialties. You just call them by first name. No one calls them, in a work setting, no one really uses their last name or doc or whatever. Unless it's a really old prof, you can go, oh, Prof Parkin, hi. Like no one really uses last name. To enhance the casual setting, people will call you mate, dude, man. Jono is a term we use for anyone who's called John. If you're John, you become Jono. Dean becomes Dino. Sean becomes Shawnee. Johnny. I don't know. What do people just call you?
Just Crystal.
Chuck me a name. What's your name?
Darian.
Hey?
Darian.
Darian?
Yeah.
Someone just call you Dari or something. Legit, that's how people address each other in
Des.
hospital.
Des.
Des.
Yeah. Like Sharon would be Shaz.
Gary will be Gaz. That's how people call each other in Australia, and even in a hospital setting, that's how it actually is. They introduce themselves to patients. Hi, I'm Gaz. That's it. Even patients, we call patients on a first name basis. They call us on a first name basis. It's not just between doctors. Doctor patient, patient patient, doctor nurse, nurse patient. There are a lot of jokes. It's so casual. You just joke everywhere. It's a very relaxed setting. Like bosses throw jokes. Like you just throw jokes. Like one of my Gen Med bosses once asked me, "How do you define diarrhea? You know what's the WHO definition of diarrhea?" Anyone? You probably heard this before. No? No? And we're like, "No, Don. What's the WHO definition of diarrhea?" And his answer was, "You can't pick it up with a fork." And we're like, oh. That's the kind of things like we talk about as we walk from patient to patient on the ward. It's just random stuff like that. Generally, if the ward round goes too long or after the ward round, everyone goes for coffee. There's a very big coffee culture in Australia. And usually the most senior doctor on the team buys coffee. It's an unwritten rule. And then before you go to Australia, you must have a coffee order. Like you need to know what you drink. Latte, cappuccino, flat white. If you don't drink coffee, just say you drink hot chocolate. Because like it's really a big culture, and that's how you fit into the team. Like students, everyone come along. We go to the cafe. We buy coffee. If we're busy, we send the most junior person with money to buy coffee and bring it back. But if we got time, then we'll sit down and we'll drink coffee for like 5 minutes, then we go back to work. But there's a big coffee culture. So know what you drink. Don't be like, oh, I don't know what to drink. Just go there, and if someone say, what coffee do you drink? Just make one up, or like pre-think about it and have a coffee. When you go on ward rounds, talk. Whenever you're in hospital, go on ward rounds, talk. I put this in capitals because I think this is like the biggest difference. There, everyone talks. Smart people, empty cans, they all talk. Everyone just talks. You can't tell whether they're smart or they're just bullshitting, but they talk. They just talk. And I think like I've worked for 2 years now, and like having students from Monash in Sunway when they come for rotation in 5th year, that's the biggest difference between Monash Sunway student and a Monash Australia student. The Australian student would talk, the Sunway student keeps quiet. I had a student when I did Gen Med last year for 6 weeks. He didn't say a word to me in 6 weeks. Even I spoke to him, he just nods or shake his head. Like, I did not hear him speak for 6 weeks, which is really bad. Don't not speak. Speak. Like, you can ask questions at any time. Everyone's very friendly. Everyone's very casual. If you don't know something or you just want to have friendly chat, just talk. No one cares. Just talk. You can ask, how's your daughter? How's your dog? Like, how's the job going? How's the diet? Like, how's your wife? I don't know. No one really cares. Like, the more you talk, the more noticeable you are. And the main thing about how to get a reference is you want to be noticeable. You want to be remembered. Like, if you don't talk, no one will take note of you. Like, you have to talk, and the friendlier you are, like, the more comfortable the boss will be with you. And if they're comfortable with you, they give you a good reference. So yeah, talk, ask questions. If you're really keen on that specialty or you really want to do some research, ask if they have research. There's usually a research project floating around somewhere. They need someone to do the dirty data crunching work that no one else wants to do, then they get a student to do it. So yeah, and be friendly with everyone. When I say everyone, I mean everyone. Patients, nurses, doctors, pharmacists, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, cleaners. Be friendly with everyone. Like, don't be mean. Like, a lot of people I know are mean to non-doctors. Let's say they're nice to doctors, but then they're mean to nurses, which doesn't make sense to me. You should be friendly to everyone. Because if you're friendly to a nurse, the nurse would then might go to your boss and say, that guy's really good, that guy's really friendly. And then your boss will take note. Like, I'm friendly to the kitchen staff, so I get free meals from hospital, like, most of the time. They just bring me, like, I get extra fish and chips or whatever. So, like, if you're friendly to everyone, it comes back to you. I believe, like, being friendly to everyone, even your juniors and, like, non-medical staff really helps. And people notice, if you're on a first name talking basis to a random nurse on the ward, your boss will notice. Your boss will be like, how is this guy talking to like a nurse? Like this nurse, even though he's only been here for 1 week and they're already like on so good terms. And like, it shows a lot about your character. So I think like if you can, try to be friendly. Oh, this laptop's dying. I'll speed up. On ward rounds, when you go around and see people with the team, be engaged, be very proactive, speak up. You can write notes. You can pick up the file and just write random notes if you want. No one cares. As long as you sign it off and you write your name and we know that note is from your name, that's allowed. No one really cares. We go on ward rounds. If you want to write ward round notes, that's also okay. If you don't know, you can ask the junior doctor, so the intern, the resident, how do I write notes? Or you can watch them and then you can try the next patient. Be very proactive. Don't wait for them to tell you, do you want to write notes? Ask them, can I write the notes? Then most of them will say yes, and then we give it to you, and then you just write. If you're not writing notes, you can always hold the observations folder and tell them the obs are good, or the heart rate's 150, we have to do something. You can do that, or you can look and tell them, oh, this patient's febrile. Like, just be proactive. Don't wait for someone to ask you to do it. Go and pick it up, do it yourself. It shows initiative. If you get an opportunity to do procedures, do it. Just do it. If you fail, that's fine. Everyone fails. Like, you only get better through practice. Just do it. Do a cannula, do a catheter. If one of the surgical trainees asks you, can you scrub it and be my assistant? Go do it. Just do it. Like, you can tell them, I don't know, I've never done this before. But they'll say, okay, I'll show you how. But then come in and help. Just go and do it. When I did like my surgical training as an intern, as a student, I always made sure I was scrubbed into theatre with my boss, because he's my supervisor, and I will try to organize swaps to make sure I scrub in, so they know I'm there, and you just show that proactiveness. Just go do it. If you don't know, don't worry. Just make sure you tell them, I don't know how to do this. I've never done this before, but I'm willing to try. And then if they're not comfortable with you doing it, they'll say, all right, that's okay, you can watch for now, maybe the next one you do it. But if they're comfortable, they say, okay, come, just hold the retractors and watch, kind of thing. But be proactive, volunteer to do stuff, don't wait for people to ask you to do it. Say, oh, is there a spare spot? Can I come in? Can I do this? You can make phone calls to anyone you want. You can call GPs to chase history, you can call pathology, you can call radiology. The only thing I think people are particularly picky about is making referrals in hospital. They don't really like it when students make referrals. Some people do, some people don't. But in general, at work, we don't get students to make referrals, just as a courtesy kind of thing. That's probably about it. If you're a fifth year student, you can always teach third years on the rounds. You can take them on tutorials. It's also a proactive thing to do. If you come across a patient and you're like, I've never heard about this before, or I'm not quite sure what to do in this setting, go home, look up papers, look up some resources, come back the next day and say, I looked this up yesterday. This is what this journal shows, this is what the paper shows. Be proactive and like contribute to the team, and then everyone will be very impressed. If you know the patients very well, let's say a new patient came in yesterday, you admitted the patient with your registrar, and next day on the round, your registrar is not there, and the specialist comes around, present the patient. They say, I know this patient, can I present this patient? And most of the time they'll say yes. They'll never say no, no one says no. Everyone says, yes please. Then you present. Even if your presentation is bad, it can only get better. And by volunteering to present a patient, it shows a lot. I don't know, coming from my end of things, when I stand back and I watch a student present, it shows a lot. That means you already know the patient, you saw the patient yesterday, and you're willing to speak up and present, and you're brave, and you're taking the initiative. Having said all of that, you still have to work hard. Don't slack off. Even though you call your boss Jono, you shouldn't slack off, because if you come once a day, once a week, if you come every Monday and say, hi Jono, and then you disappear for the rest of the week, he will realize like you're not there for the rest of the week. You still have to work hard. We know if you're there, and we kind of know if you disappear, because you're just missing. And usually, if you're not there, everyone in the morning will say, oh, where's our student today? They're just not there. Okay, whatever, we carry on, but we know you didn't come in today. If you're not coming in, just say, oh, I'm not feeling too well, I'm not coming in tomorrow. Oh, I have a tutorial, I have to leave at 1. And then you leave. No one knows if you have a tutorial or not, but at least you let us know, and then we know that you're going. Yeah, if you're there early and you leave late, we actually know, because generally interns and residents, we work long hours. So if you're there before us and you leave after us, we know that you're there before us and you leave after us. But if you come like from 10 to 12 and leave, we also know, because we're there from like 8 to 10 anyways. So we see you, and generally the registrars and the bosses will ask us, how is this student? I have to do their assessment. Are they good? Are they here a lot of the time? And then we will tell them. So you still have to work hard, but working hard is one side of the thing, one side of the coin to get like a good reference. Being part of the team and assimilating and being really comfortable and casual is another part. So if you work well, you get a good reference. If you work hard, you get a good reference. But if you can be very friendly, be part of the team, be very proactive, you get a superb reference. Like the consultant will go to the hospital and die will vouch for you. He's like, this person must come in. I know in Monash, there's a secret meeting every year where all the big consultants sit down and HR will like pull up pictures of all the applicants and say, who knows this one? You want this applicant to work here next year? And then someone will say, yes. And it's like, okay, done. Who wants this one? Who wants it? They legit pull up your face and they point and ask all the bosses, who worked with this student before? Are they good? Do you want them hired here next year? No, it is. It's a true thing. They do it. So if you're noticeable and the consultant remembers you, you get a job, because HR will listen to the specialist, and if the specialist says they want you, they will hire you. There's no questions asked. So, anyways, that's about it. This is my last slide, just to remind everyone, speak up, because you can save lives. If we make mistakes, doctors make mistakes on a daily basis. I make mistakes on like an hourly basis probably. But if you pick up a mistake, just speak up. Just say, it's like, is 500,000 milligrams of morphine a smart idea? And they're like, oh no, shit. Cross off. Yeah? Or if you think something is wrong, another way to put it is like, for my own learning, I've never seen 500,000 milligrams of morphine given out. Is that a thing? And then they're like, oh shit, no. Or it's like, what's a normal dose of morphine? And they're like, oh shit, no. There's many ways you can say it in a very polite way. Don't like, hey, why you write 500,000 milligrams of morphine? Why you do this? You know, that's more like a rude way to say it. But if you say it in a nice way, it's like, sorry Jono, like, is this right? Or, sorry Jono, how much morphine do you normally give this post-op patient? You know, there's nice ways to say it in an indirect manner. But speak up. Number one thing to take from my talk, speak up and be noticeable and be proud. That's it. In between. So I'll be in KC for a bit, if any of you are coming to KC. And then I'm going back to Traralgon because I opted to. I'll be in Moorabbin, and I'll be in MMC, Monash Medical Centre, for the rest of the year. So if you see me, I'll see you. If not, if you're on my team, I'll buy you coffee. But you must have a coffee order. No questions?
It's the best coffee.
No? No? Okay.